If you're watching these videos and thinking, yeah, someday I'm going to take apart a Chevy 350 and put it back together, do yourself a favor and clean it before you take it apart. Spray it down with degreaser and soap and hit it with a power washer because the engine's pretty waterproof before you take it apart, but every one of these parts is nice and clean and oily on one side and has a lot of heavy soil on it on the outside, and it's way easier to just blast that off instead of having to scrape into each nook and cranny like I'm attempting to do here. The easiest part to clean was the intake manifold. It's aluminum, so you can just spray it down with the hose. I used some degreaser and a brush to loosen most of it up, but you don't really have to dry this that well because it's aluminum, so it can't rust. And also, we're not painting it, so definitely the easiest one we're going to look at today. And just as a point of reference, the footage cleaning the intake manifold is over a half hour long. I'm not going to make you sit through that. There's some time lapses in there, so it might have been even longer in real time, but there were a lot of parts to clean. Pretty much every other part is made out of cast iron, and it starts to rust a little bit as soon as you clean it. Just like a cast iron pan, I guess maybe we need to season it. You ever see those places that make the rolled ice cream? This is kind of like that, but way grosser. So I'll take you from start to finish for one part, from cleaning all the way through painting, and then I think you'll get the gist of what I had to do to the other 300 parts on this engine. The first step was just wiping out all the old oil and wet gunk that had accumulated over the years. I don't really know why this part is so greasy. It's the baffle for the bell housing, which is dry. I guess all the oil leaked right into this pan. Once you have the wet stuff out, I found it helpful to go over the whole surface with a scraper, either a paint scraper like this or a putty knife, just something to get that now dry stuff off, because that'll gunk up your brushes and the wire wheel we're going to use later. Once the loose stuff was scraped off, it's time to scrub. I filled the bucket with degreaser or some simple green, I think it's also degreaser, I'm not really sure. And then using a combination of wire brushes, toothbrushes, and other brushes, I just scrubbed the surface and rinsed and scrubbed and rinsed until it was as clean as I could get it, basically. Here you can see the grease is really starting to loosen up, and then I'm scraping the paint away, which again is okay because we're trying to take it all the way down to the bare metal. Just got to remember to dunk and clean your brush off. The wire brush works pretty well. An important part of this process is periodically wiping and drying the part down to get that soul-crushing realization that it's not as clean as you thought it was and you still have a lot more work to do. And of course, another key step is to just get really frustrated and hit it with the blowtorch to try to burn off the oil and whatever else is on the surface. This worked okay, but it was mostly just very de-stressing to light something on fire. Plus, once I dunked it into water, I think the steam from it cooling down actually helped more than anything. Several times in this process, I searched part cleaner cabinets and just decided it wasn't worth the investment. Side note, it probably was worth the investment. Or sandblasting kits. My air compressor is way too small to run one, so again decided it was too expensive, and I think I was wrong about that. Once it's as close to painted metal as we can get, we're not quite done yet, but before we move on to the next step, I want to get as much of the oil lifted off the surface so that we can keep our wire brushes clean as they can be. And then the last step in our cleaning process is just hitting it with the wire wheel mounted to the 3/4 inch angle grinder. This part's pretty satisfying because you can see it both removing all the paint and the grime that's left and also polishing it back down to the bare metal. This will give us a good surface to paint on. Also, you can see I'm wearing pants in these clips with the wire wheel. That is because I learned this lesson the hard way. And then once we've scraped, scrubbed, and wire wheeled every surface, we can hit it with some denatured alcohol or acetone just to remove any remaining oil, and we are ready for paint. If you want to be really good at painting, surface prep is the most important thing, and then the second most important thing is your first coat should be way less paint than you think it should be. You want to like barely see the paint after you do your first pass. Let that dry, continue to build light coats on top of it, and you'll have a much better time than one heavy coat. Admittedly, these coats are way too heavy. And then after like 2 hours of work, spread out over a couple weekends, you have a beautifully painted part. And again, this is the baffle for the bell housing. Nobody's ever going to see this. It's not even that important, but it is beautiful. I wasn't kidding when I said paint is all about prep. Here we're masking any of the mating surfaces that we don't want to get paint on. I started out doing this with like a knife and trying to be very accurate, and then realized that A, it doesn't really matter. Nobody's doing an inspection of the engine, and I can always just sand off the paint later if I accidentally get some paint somewhere it's not supposed to be. You know, like the previous guy. So any of the engine parts that get really hot got first a coat of high temp engine primer in gray, and then a coat of Chevy orange spray paint, again high temp. I did a lot of light coats, but this is what the final parts ended up looking like. And then the most satisfying part, we get to peel all that tape off and reveal that clean surface underneath. It's pretty satisfying. Any of the engine accessories that don't really get that hot or weren't important enough for me to go out to the store to get more orange spray paint when I ran out, just got a coat of 2-in-1, which is a Rust-Oleum primer and paint combo, flat back, satin black, whatever's on sale. The heads were one of the cleaner parts that I refurbished, and you can really see the difference of the new on the left and the old on the right. So now we have a nice pile of bright orange clean parts that are ready to be put back together. And honestly, we better hurry up because you can almost see the clean surfaces starting to rust in this video. Almost.